Meet Britain's cheapest and most practical supercar, the Sierra Cosworth, a 140-mile-an-hour shuttle that's so untemperamental it can be serviced by the Ford garage down the road.
But for you and me, by far the most tantalising thing about owning a Cosy is just how cheap they are. Here we are in an F-plate 20,000-mile Sapphire Cosworth. Now, it might surprise you if I told you that the market for these cars is so depressed that you could have this one sitting in your garage for 6,000 quid. And if you want to know how much performance 6 grand buys you, hold on.
There's nowhere to do speeds like this except a test track under supervised conditions.
Here we are at the high-speed track at Myra, approaching 130. This has to be the motor trade's best-kept secret, a rummage sale-priced adrenaline pump that will happily chew the coattails of a Porsche 911 or trundle the kids to and from school. Interested? Thought you might be. You've got 3 choices, really, starting in chronological order with the earliest Cosworth, the 3-door with its distinctive whale tail. Then you've got the executive slingshot, the Sapphire 4-door, and top of the tree comes the very latest 4x4 Cosworth. The problem with the original Cosy, it's a bit of an old warhorse. It's too rough and raucous to be used seriously as an everyday car. They're more collectible and necessarily more expensive too, reckon on about £8,000 to £9,000 for a nice condition D-plater.
The Sapphire, on the other hand, is a more refined, sober-suited conveyance, but with just as much heave. It's also the cheapest of our trio, less than £5,000 buys an E-plater. But the best of the trinity has to be the 4-wheel drive Cosworth. Fair weather or foul, it remains firmly riveted to the tarmac long after the 2-wheel drive car would have assumed a spectacular tail slide. They're all turbocharged, so what about reliability?
The whole car is very strong. There's no major problems with any of it. The turbocharger is very reliable. It's a Garrett T3 unit, and providing the oil has been changed regularly from new, then there's no reason why you should have any problem at all with the turbo. To put the reliability into context, you could quite easily say that the Cosworth Sierra is as reliable as a normal 1.8 Sierra GL that you'd see driving up and down the motorway any day.
And servicing won't break the bank. A full 24,000 mile going over costs between £150 and £200. And spares shouldn't be a worry either. You can buy them from that nice man who sells you the bits for your Fiesta.
Cosworths are cheap for various reasons, and one of them is a nasty habit of disappearing in the night and reappearing in the morning looking a lot like this. Not for nothing has the Cosworth been dubbed Britain's most stolen car. Apart from keeping a Doberman in the glove box, there are ways of making your Cosworth virtually theft-proof. The forest of diodes on this steering column is meant to tell prying eyes that there are no less than 2 anti-theft devices fitted to this Cosworth. Now, one's a conventional alarm, you've all heard that. Sounds like a New Year's Eve party, while the other is what's known as the vector system, which is operated by this little key, which when you remove it, cuts your ignition and fuel system and hopefully renders the car immobile and impotent. You can even take it a step further and fit a special solenoid which locks the brakes up when you're parked, which sounds like quite an arresting idea. But the bottom line is, all Cosworths, without exception, need to be wired up like the Pentagon, and some insurance companies are even insisting that you have something like the Vector alarm fitted before they'll give you or your Cosworth the time of day. The bad news is that getting an insurance quote that's remotely palatable is likely to be both an expensive and a grim business.
For me, with a full no-claims bonus, a squeaky clean licence, and the car fitted with an immobiliser, my first quote was for over £2,000, but half an hour on the phone, and I got it down to a more reasonable £1,081. So make sure you let your fingers do the walking.
So you're about to buy a used Cosworth. What do you look for? Well, job number 1 is to make sure that the chassis number tallies with that as it appears in the registration document. There's a small plate on the slam panel underneath the bonnet, but that alone isn't definitive. The same number should appear down here, stamped into the floor by the driver's seat under this little plastic flap. Now on this car, no number appears at all because the car's been reshelled, so it's time to ask some questions.
Look for signs of repaired accident damage, the Cosworth's enemy. Check for paint around the windscreen rubbers and under the door handles. Any overspray inside the engine compartment is not good news. And while you're at it, sight along the flank to look for ripply panels.
And when you start up from cold, listen for a dieseling or knocking noise. If it carries on for a few seconds, that's okay, it's piston slap. But if it carries on for longer than, say, 5, 6, 7 seconds, that means the engine could be really worn. And remember, there's no synchromesh on reverse, so they all do that. When you're actually rolling, try the brakes a couple of times for 2 reasons. The first is, if it judders, that means the discs could be warped and they'll need changing. It's not a big job, about 150 pounds for both. And when you brake, feel if the steering column moves. If there's any lateral movement in the steering column, that means the track control arm bushes are going as well. Again, not a major job, but it'll need to be done. Reckon on about 60, 70 quid all in. And just to prove exactly how cheap they are, here's a car we pulled out of a local magazine that's actually for sale today. An H-plate 4x4 Cosworth in magenta with black leather trim at a whisker under 10,000 quid. For the money, this has to be one of the most able and exciting cars you can buy. And believe it or not, this Ford will accelerate to 60 in the same time it takes a £120,000 Ferrari Testarossa. And if that doesn't sound like good value, I don't know what does.